What if your morning coffee ritual, the thing that helps you function, is actually the thing keeping you stuck? For Steve Frazier, this wasn't just a health curiosity, it was a wake up call. After 23 years of running restaurants, chasing success, and living on caffeine and cortisol, Steve didn't just burn out, he cracked open. Then came the real heartbreak, witnessing miscarriages and a stillbirth in his own immediate family, all while learning about the links between caffeine, pregnancy loss, and hormone disruption. That personal pain turned into purpose, and his first book, Release the Coffee Cuffs, is now helping people all over the world break free from dependence on caffeine, reclaim their energy, and finally understand how self sabotage often hides in our most normalized habits. In this conversation, Steve gets brutally honest about what caffeine is doing to our bodies, especially women's bodies, and why the path to real energy starts not with more hustle, but with more awareness. Whether you're someone who just needs one cup to get going or you're chasing the high all day, this episode will challenge what you think you know about energy, addiction, and what it truly takes to heal. But before we dive into this episode, you already know what time it is. With me, y'all. Welcome to the Empowered Plates, Empowered Lives podcast. Y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Empowered Plates, Empowered Lives podcast. It's your healthy habits and lifestyle coach, Jovonnie. This is the space where survival mode ends and your healing journey begins. If you've been pushing through pain, fatigue, bloating, or hormonal chaos, I want you to know that your body isn't broken. It's just speaking. Welcome to the Good Vibe Studio, Mr. Steve.
Thank you so much, Jovonnie, for having me.
Yes, sir. Let's start at the beginning with your story. You spent decades in the restaurant industry. What was your personal relationship with caffeine during that time? And when did you start realizing it might be doing more harm than good?
I lived on caffeine for those 23 years. And I mean, I had my wife and I had 6 different restaurants, not all at once, but over that 23 years. And when we would open a new one, I would live on caffeine all day. I mean, I was double-fisted cappuccino guy, and lot of energy. I mean, at the time I was young, early 30s, but nothing really hit me hard until about 11 years ago. And I was traveling, and I left my house with coffee in hand, 45 minutes away. I thought I was having a heart attack. I had palpitations, and I called my wife. I said, I'm turning around. When I get home, would you take me to the ER? So we went, and I'm still having them. Okay. And they put me on an EKG, and the doctor came in and he said, well, you're going to be okay. You're going to be fine. You're not having a heart attack. He said, what you have are called premature ventricular contractions. That is PVCs. He said, and in real life, everyone gets these. You happen to be in a minority of people that can feel them. It's kind of exaggerated. Whatever. It's my personality, right? And I said, so what causes this? And he said, well, stress, mostly. And then he paused and he said, and caffeine, with a little smirk. And, for the guy that's drinking a lot of caffeine, this is not what you want to hear. Okay. This is bad news. And so, and we're watching my PVCs on the EKG machine. And whenever I'd have one, the chart would go way high. So it's real, And so I quit. And like every other person, every other human nature is, I've got this under control. I can go back. Wow. Yeah. I mean, if that doesn't resonate with anyone about anything in their lives, that would be something to take away, right? Because I just thought, well, I got this. So I went back on and never got off until 2 years ago. I just thought I only had one bad episode in that whole time with the PVCs, but I thought I have to do this. So I quit cold turkey, which I would not recommend you do because it's brutal. Headaches, severe headaches, and we'll get into that later, why that actually happens. And there's a real physiological reason why you get headaches after you quit caffeine, but the fatigue and the brain fog. And I called up my daughter, who is a natural health practitioner, and I said, so do you have any supplements that you can help me? Because it's all natural. She deals in all natural supplements. And I thought, well, she's the girl. And she laughed. She kind of chuckled. And she said, well, all I can tell you is drink lots of water because you'll stay hydrated. Okay, possibly with lemon, things like that, which help hydrate your cells. And if you want to humor yourself, you can take some ibuprofen. It's not going to help. You realize that she doesn't tell people to take this. She was humoring me because I'm her dad. And, she said, there is no cure for this. There's no way to relieve the symptoms. And then in my research, I found that the only solution to that headache is caffeine. Because the adenosine.
Isn't that ironic?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's right. And so, and we're going to talk about this throughout the day today, because we're going to be with each other like for 3 to 5 hours. And so, because I have a lot to say. So, but what it is that it's a rinse and repeat. And people get in this cycle. And when you come off of caffeine during the day or in the morning, when you get up, you get that beginning of a headache, and you get brain fog, and you get fatigue. And the only way to relieve that is to have caffeine. And that's why many people, first thing when they get out of bed, they have a cup of coffee, which is possibly one of the worst things you can do for yourself. Okay. In the grand scheme of things.
Is it always coffee though? Like, what if it's someone who drinks high caffeine sodas and that's their thing? Multiple caffeine drinks,
tea,
Coke,
energy drinks, Coke, right? Yep.
Monsters. Okay.
And here I'm going to tell you how I start my day, and then I'll tell you what the difference is when you start your day with caffeine. So when I wake up in the morning, I walk to my living room window, which faces east, and I watch the sun come up. And it's either up or it's about to come up because I get up fairly early. In the wintertime, I have a sun lamp. And what that does is it helps my body kickstart the cortisol. Your body naturally creates cortisol in the morning because that's what gives you energy to start your day. And this is a good thing. This is a really good thing. And then I hydrate with lemon water. I put some other stuff in there. But lemon water is really crucial because, once again, you dehydrate overnight. And so I then rehydrate myself. And then throughout the day, my cortisol goes down and my melatonin and my adenosine goes up. And adenosine is the key there, because adenosine is what actually helps you go to sleep at night naturally. And here's the interesting part about adenosine is that the adenosine molecule and the caffeine molecule are very similar. So when you drink caffeine, and it crosses the blood-brain barrier, it goes into your adenosine receptors, the caffeine molecule does, and it blocks it. It blocks the adenosine. So guess what? You're not tired. You're alert. You get a really false sense of being on top of the world, and you are for a short period of time. Now, let's talk about, but what happens now with me is that my circadian rhythm stays the same because I'm not disrupting it. And your circadian rhythm is your natural sleep cycle. It's how you wake up in the morning. It's how you go out through the day and how you naturally go to sleep at night. Now, if you drink caffeine first thing in the morning, anything, you automatically pump up your cortisol. That's one of the reactions that caffeine has on your body. And you don't control this. This is something that happens in your body. Now, we all have different ways to process caffeine through our livers, different enzymes, different genes. Okay, so everybody's different. And as I talk about this, I want to make sure everyone understands that much of what I talk about is generalities, because there's always exceptions, right? Okay. So, I mean,
And I think
some
when
guy,
you're talking about it, Steve, I'm automatically thinking like when you're talking about the caffeine, is it like caffeine daily? If it's multiple forms of caffeine daily, whether it's I drink several, like even after us having our pre-recording, and I was talking to some of my students and they were talking about like Red Bulls. And I was just like,
oh,
do you
yeah.
know what that's possibly doing to your body? And how many days are y'all with your period? You want to share that? I know you were talking about in that luteal phase,
Yep.
7 to 14 days prior to your
Right.
menstrual cycle. Like,
Yeah.
what does caffeine do to the body? If you want to kind of get into that. So I was already telling them a
Sure.
little bit about it, but from Monster drinks, energy drinks, caffeine, caffeinated, the different cappuccinos, coffees, lattes, like
Right.
how Coca-Colas, all the different drinks that have caffeine in it. What do you think is a lot in regards that could have the impacts that you're talking about? And then how does that affect the female body?
I think that anything over 100 to 200 milligrams is going to disrupt your circadian rhythm, because you can't help it. Because I talked about that first thing in the morning when you jump your cortisol. Well, that automatically disrupts your sleep at night. Now, if you don't have any caffeine after 12 noon, you possibly won't have that effect. Very few people stop drinking caffeine at 10 a.m. or even at noon. They're drinking it throughout the day. I know a lot of people probably try to stop at supper because they think that it might affect their sleep. But the problem, the challenge there is not that they won't go to sleep at night. It is their sleep that they're going into, because there's 4 stages of sleep. The first 2 are how you get into your sleep. So sometimes you will take a little longer if you're on caffeine. But the third stage is where your body heals. And that's for men, that's where they create testosterone. For women, it's estrogen, but you're healing. And stage 4 is REM sleep. And that is where you actually dream and your subconscious is working. Now, when your circadian rhythm is disrupted, both of those stages are delayed and shortened. And you have 2 to 3 or maybe even 4 cycles sometimes of these 4 stages of sleep at night. However, if you're not reaching that deep sleep in third stage and 4th stage, then what happens is that you wake up and you're tired because you haven't got a real restful sleep. Now, we talk about women and how caffeine affects men and women differently. This is, I had no idea until I started to research for my book, what's going on here. And so depending on what phase of your menstrual cycle you're in as a woman, you will process caffeine dramatically different. So in the beginning of your menstrual cycle, you're methylating or you're processing quite well. And there's a gene, it's called the CYP1A2. Okay, that's a fun fact to know and tell, which you can write down. Nobody will maybe remember. I wrote it down so I could make sure. Eventually, I'll just memorize it, right? But
it's not
CYP1A2, right? And that is the gene in men and women that helps to process or methylate or demethylate caffeine. And because what happens is in your body, you demethylate caffeine, and that helps your body process it. Generally, when you take in a toxin, you methylate it. It goes into your kidneys and your bladder, and then you dispose of it. Okay, but if you hold on to it, then you get sick. I know a lot about this because my wife has a MTHFR gene mutation, which is methylation. She got it when she got Lyme disease 13 years ago, and so she doesn't release toxins; she holds them. And then they turn into stones, and then she has to deal with that, which we do. However, so in the beginning stages of your menstrual cycle, you can drink normal amount of caffeine, and it's going to have the same effect. Okay, now every person's different, and every woman is different. They can be a fast metabolizer or a slow metabolizer. But when you get into that luteal phase, you process caffeine 70% slower. Now, to put that into perspective, the half-life of caffeine is 5 to 8 hours. So if you're in that phase, then you are now methylating at 8 to 12 hours. So if you have a cup of coffee at noon and it's got 200 milligrams, which many standard cups have, you now have at 10 o'clock at night, possibly half of that is still active. Okay. Which you don't really realize because the adrenaline's worn off, the dopamine's worn off, but the cortisol, that it's still being impacted because of your metabolism. Now, what's the solution? One of the solutions is actually track your caffeine intake at different times of the month to see how you feel. Okay. Because caffeine can actually exacerbate your PMS, your cramps, these kind of things, and it's kind of ironic is that if you look at some of the over-counter PMS things, there's a whole bunch of caffeine in it. Okay. Now caffeine does things for you. I mean, it makes you feel good, gives you a dopamine hit. It releases adrenaline, but it's possibly making your cramps worse or your whole experience there worse. And so
I had no idea that there was caffeine in some of the medication that people take for PMS. Caffeine, like this is new to me. Y'all drop caffeine in the comments if you're someone who's already learned something about caffeine that you knew nothing about. If there's just one interesting fact, which might be the CYP1A2, that actually is the gene that processes caffeine. Like, just drop caffeine in the comments if you have learned something from Steve in this conversation thus far about caffeine. So I really appreciate you talking about that solution, some of the solutions and tracking. I love that, tracking your caffeine intake and seeing how you feel over the different phases of your cycle, from the luteal phase, the menstrual cycle, the ovulation, the follicle, and if you don't even know about all the different phases, track it over the month and see how you're feeling in the various times of the month that you feel differently when they're tracking. I really appreciated that insight, Steve. Another one, going back to the phases of the cycle, you said the first phase is actually getting into sleep. And depending on that caffeine load, that might be a task or trouble for some people. I didn't catch the second phase, but I know the third phase is when the body starts to heal, and the fourth phase is when you get into that deep REM sleep. What was phase two?
Phase two is just an extension of phase one. It's that entry into your stage 3 sleep, where you heal. And I just want to touch on one other thing. We talked about the different phases and the methylation process. Birth control pills cause you to process 40% slower as well. And that's every day. Yes, that's every day. So just be aware of that if you're on birth control pills, it'll take you longer to get rid of caffeine. Now there's opposites of that. There's some things that you can take. Smoking, as an example, I am not encouraging smoking here, but smoking will actually help you get rid of caffeine faster. Now, what is smoking going to do to you? We won't go into that because that's a rabbit hole again for a different day. But so when you go into your sleep, it's in the first chapter of my book, I have what's called anecdotal stories. And I originally put it in there as the last chapter, and I'm going somewhere with this, just so you know, in relation to the sleep thing. I originally had it in as a last chapter as kind of an entertainment thing, it's kind of to really look at what people are talking about when they're quitting caffeine. And as I put it together, I realized that it could be one of the most impactful chapters. And I then made it the first chapter because I think there's 20 stories in there. Of the 20 stories, 19 of them said without a doubt that their sleep was so much better now that they couldn't actually remember when the last time that they slept this well. And one lady said it didn't really make any difference. Now, what she doesn't realize is that when you're not on caffeine and you takes you a while to get back to normal, if you quit, you're going to sleep better because your circadian rhythm, it's science. It's your cells. It's what's going on in your head and your adrenals. And so you then look at that and you say, wow, because I put it in there because when you read that, every person that reads that chapter will find themselves in there somewhere. They'll say, oh, that's me. Oh, wow, that hurt. That hurt a little bit, Gabe. Don't, because we're talking about things here that some people don't want to hear, right? It's called cognitive dissonance. Are you familiar with the term? It's when you hear things that are against what you believe.
And I think not only what you believe, but it might also challenge how you want to live. Exactly. And when it challenges what you want to live, you may start thinking of ways to find a way to combat or debate that or figure out a like, okay. And I'm glad that you talked about cognitive dissonance, Steve, because I think that a lot of times that's what keeps people stuck in cycles of survival mode, or keeps people stuck in a place that they're not able to really show up and help themselves heal or be in a space of wanting to heal. And I know that's a big thing. And I kind of want to get into it because it was also when your wife's health crisis and getting that major turning point in your life and her life. Can you kind of share what really happened and how it deepened your investigation with the connection between lifestyle, illness, because we're already seeing the stimulants of caffeine. But can you kind of bring some of that in? Because I think that's very valuable, because now we're talking about lifestyles. Now we need to make some changes because we hear the science. We know what's happening to ourselves. We're getting more around these conversations, these empowering conversations and perspectives with people's experiences and their expertise and their deep dive into something. Can you kind of just share what that looked like and what that shift caused?
So about 13 years ago, she got sick, and we went and saw 17 different doctors, or as she would say, they were ologists, because they're all specialists, right? Of that 17, the only one that was really honest with us was our general MD. And she looked at Brenda in that first visit, and she said, I'm going to tell you, I don't know what's wrong with you, and I don't know how to fix you. So then we started to see all these people, got referrals. And without a doubt, the majority of them had no idea what was wrong with her. And some of them blamed her. They said it's all in your head. And I'm sure your listeners many people have heard this. And this is not a slam on doctors. Doctors have a great place in our society. But when some doctors, keyword is some, when they don't know what's wrong with you, they blame you because they can't be humble enough to say, I don't know. But let's find out. And nobody of those 17 doctors ever said, let's keep going. Let's find out. So after 2 years, she was almost dead. She was from 115 pounds to 89. She was wasting away. And our daughter had just started a natural health practice, and through muscle testing, energy work. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's basically Eastern medicine, or a branch, because all we deal with is natural supplements. And she came over to our house, in 15 minutes after testing Brenda, she said, you have Lyme disease from the waist down. And that was confirmed about 4 days later by her mentor without any prompting. And so 11 years we've been on this journey. What the autoimmunes did was it kicked in. She's now celiac, so no gluten, but she also can't eat any grains. She can't eat any processed food. And so you learn, now this sounds really hard, and in the beginning it really is. Just like everything, if you want to be healthy, here's one of those aha moments for your people. If you want to be healthy, it's hard. This being healthy thing is not easy, because
not at all.
When you go to the grocery store, probably 95% of the stuff in there is not necessarily good for you. Okay. If you can eat organic and if you can eat at least non-GMO, that's a great step in the right direction. However, you can't eat any processed food. And my rule when we started was if there's more than 5 ingredients, we don't use it. And if you can't pronounce anything that's on the ingredients label, we don't use it. And so all of a sudden, there's not a whole lot of food in the grocery store you can eat anymore because all these things have so much in it. And what they've done is they've renamed things that are bad for you into other things which you now don't know the name. And so, we figured out by trial and error that nitrates were devastating for her health. We had smoked pork chops one night. She was sick for 2 days. The second day, she looked at me and she's in bed, okay, barely functional. She said, go down and look at the label on the package of the smoked pork chops. Well, it had nitrates added. So now if we eat any kind of bacon or ham or anything, it's uncured. Okay. So there's always solutions. Okay. You have to dive, you have to work at it. And so, we buy our meat from a farmer who I watch the fields. We buy half a cow at a time. And I know that's not appropriate for everyone and not practical, but I've watched the fields. They have 4 different fields of grass. They rotate. They're not grain finished. They're grass finished. And so she can eat this because the grain, if you grain finish beef or anything, it goes into the meat. It goes into the body of the animal, right? And so what that did is it made us again, in the beginning, it was extremely difficult, because everything's from scratch, basically. So as example, I'm here, we're on working vacation in Florida. I picked up a organic cauliflower yesterday and I boiled it up this morning and I put it in packages, and then she can eat raw cheese. She can deal well with raw dairy's not so good because before Alex got her, my daughter, they took her gallbladder out because it had sludge in it, and it definitely had sludge in it. Here's the deal: you can naturally get rid of gallstones and kidney stones and pancreatic stones naturally through different supplements, and ironically, Coca-Cola. You take supplements with Coca-Cola, and if you've ever seen you can clean toilet bowls with Coca-Cola. Okay, well,
and like battery, right? And the battery,
exactly.
And the battery.
Well, that's what you're doing to your body. You're getting rid of that stuff. And Alex actually told Brenda to do this. She said, "You realize I don't tell too many people to drink Coke very often, but now since Brenda doesn't have a gallbladder, the stones then go to her kidneys and her pancreas, and she gets them semi-regularly. But she can feel it. She's so attuned with her body now that when she starts to get a kidney stone, she can feel it. It doesn't, and kidney stones can be very painful. She can feel it coming, and then she'll take some of the supplements and she'll have a Coke, and it dissolves them and they go away. And I'm not telling you that there are instances when this doesn't work and you have to have a procedure.
Right.
But
you're just
Alex,
saying what has been working for your
it works. It works.
Exactly. And the whole point of the conversation is never to do diagnosis or promote some type of treatment plan. It's to create curiosity in order for you to do your research and for you to talk to your healthcare professionals and see what the best fit is for you. Exactly. And so I really appreciate you sharing her journey. And just to say 17 different doctors, that's a lot. And that showed resilience in wanting to figure out what is going on. Because after 5 doctors, people probably would have just been like, okay, it's whatever. What's going to happen is just going to happen. And they just kind of give up on getting an answer. And I'm just so glad that she had a support system that allowed her to keep going until she found an answer, and ended up being the answer was in her family, following a natural reaching out to a natural health doctor who has different ways of really getting in tune and identifying a root cause of what is actually happening. But I love the sound of the muscle testing and doing some energy work to be able to identify what was potentially going on. I thought that was very interesting. I love the rule that you play, Steve, in regards to grocery shopping. And that was, if you can't pronounce it, we're not buying it.
Yeah.
And if it has more than 5 ingredients, we're not buying it. Because
Yeah.
even though there's healthier options, and like you said, it's a step in the right direction, it isn't the total destination. And it
No.
really is a journey on figuring out what is ideal. Like, even when you talked about getting your meat from a farmer and knowing how they do their grass and knowing that she can't have grains, but if the animal had grains and the grass was in the grains, then she's going to end up getting the grains based on the meat source that she actually has. And there's so much more of a deeper connection than just picking up the package of meat, looking at what it says on it and thinking that's all that it has in it. And so I'm really glad that you brought that piece of the conversation into the grocery shopping and foods and identifying that. But you also talked about how hard it is and challenging it is to change. And we're going to get into self-sabotaging behaviors and what it took to get to a place to find that consistency to live and adjust and adapt to this lifestyle of really figuring out what aligns in her body. But before we get into that segment, y'all, welcome to your first step towards reclaiming rhythm. Y'all, the plant-based alternative guide isn't just a recipe book, it's a lifestyle awareness tool. If you've ever wondered why bloating, fatigue, or cravings keep coming back even when you're eating healthy, this guide will help show you what your body's been trying to tell you. Inside, you'll find clean swaps for common inflammatory triggers, nourishing juices and smoothies that restore balance, and simple, satisfying meals aligned with your healing. Because you don't need more restriction, you need real restoration. So eat like your healing matters, because it does. Check the show notes to get your anti-inflammatory guide. So Steve, let's talk about self-sabotage. What does that really look like? How does that really show up in someone's life in the event that they're unaware that this is truly self-sabotage?
Right. Well, we all self-sabotage. We all have this tool shed. Okay. We all do it. And that's just the way it is. What is self-sabotage? Well, it's when you undermine your own morals and values. And I do several presentations, but there's 4 pillars in self-sabotage. They are emotional, financial, spiritual, and physical. And as I got certified as a self-sabotage coach, I do presentations on self-sabotage in itself. Okay. And what I found as I got into the physical pillar, that's probably perhaps the most important one, because if you're healthy, you can do anything. Literally. And if you're not healthy, what do you think about? Your health. People that are not, well, look at Brenda and I, every day we deal with what can she eat today? How is she feeling today? There's a lot of other things going on in the world which really don't concern us, because the only important thing is to get her to feel better and get her health back. Okay. So as you look at that physical pillar, there's a number of self-sabotage tools in there. And when I say these, you're going to recognize them because everybody does them, right? Alcohol, caffeine, tobacco, drugs, prescription drugs, overeating. Okay. I'll share a personal story. One of my biggest self-sabotage traits is I am an overindulger. I can't stop eating when I start. And over the last 11 years, actually, when we got this whole thing started with Brenda, I've lost 53 pounds. Okay. And that's not easy when you're later on in your years. Your metabolism is not the same. And what my challenge is now is that when I eat in the morning, I think, well, you already blew it, so you just eat all day. Okay, that's self-sabotage. That is the epitome of self-sabotage. Okay, it's just like the person that's drinking alcohol. Well, I had a beer at noon. What's the difference? Now I might as well just drink the rest of the day and do a day drinking and then just pass out tonight. And so you look at all these different areas and you realize that and there's some virtues that they go along with it, with dealing with self-sabotage. And perhaps the biggest one is humility, because that goes back to that cognitive dissonance. If you have cognitive dissonance, you can't be humble. You have to be able to admit that something you're doing is not right. And it's not right for you, and you know it's not right, but then you have to address it, you have to research it and determine how that's going to play into your life. And so courage, vulnerability, these are all traits of self-sabotage. And, in the mental one, as an example, I had a therapist for 18 years on and off. Now, I haven't seen her in 10 years, but she helped me through some very hard times. And ironically, a good therapist never tells you what to do. A good therapist lets you talk and then guides you into discovering what's good for you. And only one time in that 18 years, and her name was Patty, and only one time did she ever tell me that I was wrong. And that was in the last session we had, which again is 10 years ago. And I'll never forget it, because I said to her, there's only, and we kind of knew we were done for now. And I was in a good place, and I have been ever since. But I said, the only regret I have is that I had to come to see you, because that I perceived it as a weakness. And she looked at me and very firmly, with a smile on her face, she said, "No, Steve, you're wrong. That was one of the strongest, most courageous things that you ever did, because you were willing to admit that you needed help." And people don't want it. People don't know. That's a weakness, right? I mean,
it is. And I actually asked some of my students that this week. So, we were talking about collaborative study groups. And when you're not doing good in a class, like you're not supposed to be good at everything, who has a problem or who struggles with asking for help. And most of the biggest aha I got out of that, Steve, was there was one class where almost half the students said they had a problem with asking for help. These are high school students. So can you imagine what that grows into if they don't have someone to let them know that there's courage that comes from that you're not supposed to figure out everything by yourself. Even when I told them going to college, getting ready for, more challenges, you might have professors that don't teach well. Like, are you now going to fail out of college and go home just because that one teacher didn't help you? Or are you going to find support, whether it's a tutor or other peers on campus that have passed the class, to help you get to a place where you can overcome challenges? And then I even placed it in regards to careers. Like, you don't do a business by yourself. You need people to get in front of their audience. You need people to invest in your business. You need people to collaborate with you to help move the mission forward. It gets better with other people's help and support and guidance. And that's not a weakness. That's a strength when you know when you need help. And so I'm really glad that you talked about that. And then for you to say, your therapist never told you what to do. They helped in guiding you to identify what's best for you. And I absolutely love that. Why? Because, Steve, one of the biggest misconceptions when people come to work with me, as their healthy habits and lifestyle coaches, they think I'm going to tell them what to eat. And I think that's a custom when it comes to like fitness or, other things like that. But when you have a healthy habits and lifestyle coach, I want you to identify what lifestyle works for you, what lifestyle changes align for your body, respond well based on the things you want in your life. If you come to me and ask me what to eat all the time, you'll never learn how to figure out what to eat for yourself. And so it's really getting you excited about different meals, different ways to add, fruits, vegetables, switch some of your favorite meals that might not be high in nutrients to something that's going to increase the nutritional value and get you excited about the foods you already like and eating more of those. And so it's a different vibe, and I'm okay with that. Like, when you think that's what you're going to get, because that's commonly what's there, I don't want to tell you that. I want to guide and support you into embracing that lifestyle journey, embracing what's good for you. But you hit it when you started talking about those self-sabotaging pathways or pillars of self-sabotage, when they're spiritual, emotional, financial, and physical. And knowing that 85% is in that physical realm, and some of them potentially drink coffee daily, but it's really in your diet and how you had to really work for certain things in order to address the self-sabotaging behaviors in the physical realm. But so much happens in that emotional and spiritual, because if you think, feel, and have disbeliefs in certain ways that you feel like your life should look like, it's not going to help you move forward. It's going to stop you. You're not going to have the courage. You're not going to have the motivation. You're not going to have the excitement to say, oh, this is what I'm going towards. I can do these things and I can live a better life. And it's just like, yeah. But I think that when I think about the self-sabotaging expertise and experience and the things that you think about when we're talking about lifestyles, it also makes me think about lifestyle disruptors. And it's something that I like to talk to people about, because they don't realize that these lifestyle disruptors are what's really causing them to stay stuck, because they don't even realize it plays a part. So before we get into this next segment, I just want you all to know that this isn't about willpower. It's about creating safety in your body. If you've been stuck in cycles of pelvic pain, fatigue, bloating, survival mode, it's not your fault. Your body isn't broken. It's just asking for a reset. So in my training, it's called the 5 costly mistakes keeping you stuck in pelvic pain and fatigue, and how to break free naturally. I'll walk you through my HEAL method, the same root-based framework I use to move from hormonal chaos and chronic inflammation to regulated cycles, restore energy, and a life I love. Y'all, this is where the guessing ends and your healing begins, because you get insight, you get empowered. And in actuality, this journey, I don't know about you, Steve, but for me, it feels like my lifestyle changes, and on the journey to change my life, it was a journey of self-love. It was getting back to truly caring for myself and making decisions that aligned in how I needed to treat myself, because I had gotten to a place where I neglected things, whether I knew about it or didn't, about the things that really mattered, like unhealthy relationships, not managing stress, just being like, okay, it's whatever, but not truly processing it, eliminating it, getting out, moving on truly, instead of just storing some of that energy in there. It was really not just relationships, but environments, that was there, whether the toxins in regards to who I'm around, or the toxic environment, or the things that's in the environment itself. But then it was also in the food, how I was eating the food, my relationship with food, what that was doing to my life. And then movement. Like, movement is so key. Like, when you are moving and grooving, when I'm getting out there and I'm walking with my golden doodle Spencer, like, it feels so much better. You start feeling, okay, do I feel some pain? Do I feel some discomfort somewhere? And the more you keep walking, the less that pain is there. Like, it really starts to move right on out of you. And it's like, you have to help your body do the natural functions that it's doing. It's in your sleep. It's in the reduction of caffeine. It's in the way that you choose to live. It's in the way you think about yourself. Those things matter, and they play a huge role. So when you see self-sabotage and you're helping clients and coaching and you're speaking people when they're talking about self-sabotage, what do you think is that one block that's really causing them to stay stuck before you get any movement to shift them in a way of moving forward? What do you think is one of those main blockages?
I think it's the cognitive dissonance. It's how they've been programmed, because self-sabotage is about programming. I don't know if you're aware of this, but
drop the word program in the comments. Steve, you can't run past that, because there's so much programming that has happened since our inception. Like, since we've been created, there's different programming seeds. So you can't speed too fast over that one, y'all. Drop program in the comments if you're still vibing with us in this conversation and you know that programming plays a part. Go ahead, Steve.
So our subconscious is formed in the first 7 years of our life. Most of our subconscious is programmed in the first 7 years. So everything and you're in a theta, when you're that little, you're almost in a permanent state of theta brainwaves. And that is where it goes into the subconscious. Now, as an adult, you reach theta. You can reach it through hypnotherapy and things, but naturally, when first thing you wake up in the morning and the last minutes before you go to bed, you're in theta. And so, as an example, gratitude. If you go to bed at night and the last thing you think about is gratitude, guess what you're thinking about? You're dreaming about. It's in your subconscious. Okay. Instead of thinking about, oh, I really don't like that person and I really don't like what they did to me today. that's going to go into your subconscious, and that's what you're going to dream about and think about. And so now there's a ways to reprogram your mind. Okay. And that, again, hypnotherapy is a really good one. We have a 27-minute hypnotherapy for people that are trying to quit caffeine. People are trying to not overeat. And you listen to it every night for 30 days before you go to bed. Because guess what? That's when you're subconscious, and you can reprogram it. And there's a guy named Bruce Lipton. He's on YouTube, which I would really recommend if you're interested in this. It's a great resource because he talks about the subconscious. Now, realize that one thing that I do in one of my presentations about caffeine and self-sabotage is I play this commercial, waking up to Folgers in your cup. Okay. Have you ever heard of that? You know,
yes, I have.
You can literally, when I talk about it, people get a dopamine hit. Okay.
Yeah, I can smell, like when you just said it, I can smell the morning brew of coffee, and I can hear the pour, because that was definitely something in the commercial. You hear the pouring into the cup.
So mom goes in the kitchen, makes the coffee, brings 2 mugs back into the bedroom. Okay. Her husband's there where they have 2 little boys, and she hands him the mug. The boys kind of wake up, you know, they're making believe like they were asleep. They wake up, they come down. We have this big group hug, the dopamine and the serotonin, everybody's so happy. I mean, this is life. Now realize that those 2 boys, and they're both under 7, what are they being programmed to believe? Because this happens in real life. Okay. This isn't just in the Folgers commercial. Okay. You know, mom's got her cup of coffee. Don't talk to me before I drink this. All right. They're programmed to believe, in this particular instance, that caffeine is the way to successfully adult. If that makes sense. You know, they see mom and dad every day. Now realize this is every day. Okay. Sometimes if they have the ability to see each other every morning. Well, if every morning you associate caffeine with success, what are you going to do as you grow up? That's in your subconscious. It's there. I have to be like mom and dad, or grandma and grandpa. You know, one of my anecdotal stories is a girl started drinking coffee when she was 5 years old with her grandma and grandpa. You know, I talked to a lady in a podcast, and she was born in Colombia. And as a baby, her bottle was half coffee and half milk, cafe con leche. And this is how they raise their children. And she said, I think I drank that, not out of a bottle, but I drank that combination till I was 9 or 10 years old. And then I finally stopped. And then she went back, and now she's not. But it's the culture, you know, the culture. Now, Colombia, they grow a lot of coffee there, right? So when you have that culture, that's what, and how hard is it to stop a cultural movement? It's not impossible, but it can be quite difficult. Okay.
Very difficult. Almost as difficult as changing your lifestyle and adopting healthier habits. Yep. Yeah. Yep. It could definitely take a lot. But I never even thought about people adding coffee to a baby's bottle, to their milk, half.
My jaw dropped.
Yeah, I never heard of that before. And I know people say coffee has, certain benefits to it, but to think about a baby having half coffee, half milk in their bottle all the way up to the age of 9, I can only imagine what that looks like. But let's kind of shift the conversation here, Steve, because we talked about it before. How is caffeine linked to things like fertility, miscarriage, or low birth weight? And why is it more widely discussed? It isn't widely discussed in public health or prenatal care.
That's a great question. I'm really glad we got to this, because this is kind of where I want to go with my whole life. Because
with your mission,
yes, my mission, right? And that is, I understand several things. I can't make anybody do anything, and that's because we all have free will and free want. That comes from my wife. Okay, she's got a lot of Brenda-isms that I talk about, and I'll throw one in yet before we're done. But that's one of my favorites. And also, you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of people don't know what we're talking about. It's just, and it's why, and you brought it up. Why don't people talk about it? It's because it's a $1 trillion business. It's legal. Caffeine is legal. It's socially accepted. and often socially promoted. Okay. So I did a podcast with a college senior the other day. She does not know a person that doesn't drink caffeine in college. She doesn't. She was very, very honest. She said, "Now I'm going to evaluate my role here, caffeine's role in my life." But then you get back to now, what about moms and what about babies and influencing people? And my mission, as you so eloquently put it, is to, if I can convince one pregnant woman from stopping caffeine while she's pregnant, I may have played a role of saving a life. And that is the biggest reward in life. If you can save someone's life, it doesn't get much more rewarding. And I'll realize I will never know. Okay. But that doesn't matter, because I do believe that I will have the impact that somebody will do it. Because we talked about the miscarriages and the stillbirths. So what happens is when mom is drinking caffeine and she's pregnant, it does a couple things. One, the caffeine, everything goes right to the fetus, because that's how the fetus lives. So mom drinks caffeine, the caffeine goes into the baby, and the baby does not process caffeine like an adult. So the baby basically keeps most of the caffeine in its body because it hasn't that gene, that the CYP1A2, just keep saying that till we remember it. Those genes haven't been developed, so it can't process, and the liver is not fully grown, and that's how we get rid of the caffeine out of our body. And so, what can caffeine lead to? Well, and these are all documented. Okay, in the chapters, I have 300 references in my book, so I'm just not making this up. Okay, right. They're peer-reviewed studies, and the key word is caffeine can lead to these things. It's not necessarily the cause. So again, we're in a general thing. There's always exceptions. So that doesn't mean that if you're pregnant and drink caffeine, that your baby's going to be low birth weight or miscarried or stillbirth, but it can lead to that. So the case would be is maybe we should just not drink caffeine while we're pregnant, and then we wouldn't have these issues, because it can lead to low birth weight, it can lead to miscarriages, and it can lead to stillbirth. And those are documented studies. So again, if you've ever experienced a stillbirth or a miscarriage in your family or even extended family, you understand the impact this has on not just baby and not just the parents, but the whole circle of influence of that family. So it can affect 100 people. And, I think about the 2 grandchildren that I don't have today, that I know about, that were my daughter and daughter-in-law miscarried. And I would have 10. I have 8 right now, and I would have 10, right? Mm-hmm. And the whole thing is that this is something that you control. This isn't something that somebody's doing to you. And so my mission, again, is to say, well, how does this affect me? And maybe I should consider at least not doing this while I'm pregnant. Now, you look at the male side of this, and let's say we have a young couple and they want to have a baby, and they're both drinking caffeine. Once again, generally speaking, caffeine on a male will lower his overall testosterone over time if he's a chronic user, which means 200 to 500 milligrams a day. He will really limit his testosterone production, because testosterone has a love-hate relationship with cortisol. Because the more cortisol you have in your body, the less testosterone production you're going to have. And when do you produce the most testosterone? In your sleep, in that stage 3. And if that is now delayed and shortened, what that does, it lowers your libido. So you don't want to have babies. You don't have sex. Okay. Now, this is not, in the grand scheme of the world, this is not a good thing, because we need to have babies. We're already in a negative birth rate in many countries, which means that we're not having enough babies. And that's a whole nother conversation. But it also affects the man's sperm. the mobility, the motility, and it can fracture the sperm. So that means that he has a lower chance of impregnating the egg. Now, on the woman's side, caffeine will slow the blood flow to the uterus, which in turn goes to the egg, which now it is not as receptive. So what we're going for here is, what can we do to be healthier and make it easier to conceive and have a healthy baby? Okay. These are controllables. And the key word there is we control this, because we decide what goes in our bodies. And there's many things in our society, in our environment, that are uncontrollable, depending on where you live. You might have a lot of pollution, right? I mean, if you live in a major metro area and you're next to an interstate, you're sucking a lot of gas fumes, right? You don't control that unless you move. Where here, we have things that are controllable. And all I would ask is that if you're listening to this and you think, and you're trying to conceive and you're having a hard time, maybe this is an indicator of what's going on. Now, I'm not saying it is every time, because it's not, and I know that.
Right.
But as we move forward in the discussion and you do your research on this, in all my research, I have not found one study where there is a positive health impact of caffeine on the body. It just doesn't exist.
And that's someone coming with about 300 peer-reviewed studies in your book.
Yeah. Now you're going to see, you'll see studies that are done by the coffee companies or soda companies. And when you actually dig into those, you will find that the caffeine hasn't affected these people because they're in basically perfect health and they're taking care of themselves. Other than the fact that they're drinking caffeine, they really pay attention to what they're putting in their body. Now, the true study would be to take a dichotomy or a shotgun approach to the people that are in your study. So you've got somebody that's 60 and overweight, 50 and diabetic or pre-diabetic, 40 and type 1, okay? So if you take all those combinations, you'll find that there's no health benefits. There's short-term benefits to drinking caffeine, undoubtedly, okay? Because it increases your cortisol, which gives you energy, increases your adrenaline, which gives you the fight or flight, and increases your brain freeze. There's one.
Oh, no, it's okay. Because I kind of wanted to say, for someone who's listening right now, Steve, that's busy, burnt out, and barely making it through the day, what's that one small shift they can start to break free from the caffeine sabotage loop? That's what I would want.
The best advice I can give is, the first thing when you wake up in the morning is, don't drink caffeine, drink lemon water.
Okay.
And then look at the sun, because what you've done is you naturally have kickstarted your cortisol. Then after about an hour and a half, then have your cup of coffee.
What about the person? Let's think about these college students, because you just said you had a conversation with the podcast episode, and I want to think about the college students, the high school students. What if it's not the start of the day? What if it's later in the evening, when now they need to stay up to study, and that's when they're going for the Monster drinks? That's when they're going for the caffeine, because they already went to school all day. They might have went to work. They might have had practice. Now I need to stay up to do other things, and my body wants to go to sleep, and I don't have time to go to sleep. What do they do? What's that nighttime shift? Like, okay, we got the morning. What would be the nighttime shift for them, Steve?
That is a recipe for disaster.
Ooh.
And so I'm going to give you a fun fact to know and tell. And again, I didn't know this, and that's why it's a fun fact to know and tell. And that is, teenagers' circadian rhythms are different than adults. And that's real. That's documented fact. So your teenager, when they look at you and say at 10 o'clock, I'm not tired, they're not tired. Because you and I as adults, at 10 o'clock, our circadian rhythm generally starts to kick in and says, okay, your adenosine, your melatonin says it's time to go to sleep. The teenager.
So when it's time for school in the morning and they still say they're sleepy, I'm supposed to be like, oh, it's okay. You're supposed to be sleepy.
Yes. And here's the challenge, so a lot of kids, and I have grandchildren, They don't go to sleep until 11 or 12 o'clock. And when they have school, they have to get up between 6 and 7 o'clock. 7 hours of sleep is not good enough to get them through the day. And so what do? They drink some caffeine. They have a soda. They have an energy drink. Some of them may drink coffee or tea. But now you start that rinse and repeat. And I have a whole chapter just on teens, okay, and the effect that caffeine has on them, and it's documented.
Pause right there, Steve. I want everybody to know, because we never even told y'all what it is. The book is called "Release the Coffee Cuffs." And
Yes.
So when we're referring back to Steve's book, that is the name of the book, Release the Coffee Cuffs. Because we talked about the book, we talked about what's in the book, but I don't know if we actually told y'all the name.
Thank you.
And so I really wanted y'all to make sure you know the name of the book.
And it's everywhere. It's on our website, but it's on every major platform. It's available in paperback or ebooks.
So you have a specific place for teens in your book to really help identify
a whole chapter.
Those things. I think that's high value right there, because just as someone who works with teenagers, and then like you talked about with the college students, and I would love to talk more to college students, because I also understand that's where sometimes those unhealthy habits, because now you're away from family, that you're now creating on your own versus what you were subconsciously taught and was around in a certain environment. Some things you take with you off to college or off into the military life and the things that you're doing, but now you're starting to create your own lifestyle. And what that looks like. I really am glad to know that there's shifts when it comes to the different stages of life and what's actually happening in the body. So I actually want to get into this. It's called Vitality Spark segment, Steve. And so it's going to be some rapid, energizing insights to keep it really short, but really sparky and good for the lifestyle. All right. So here we go. One myth about caffeine you wish more people would know, or would question. I would say would question. One myth about caffeine you wish
there's a health benefit. That is a myth, because there is no health benefit.
All right. Morning ritual you love without coffee, even though I think if you listen to the whole episode, you would know, but I'm interested to hear yours.
Mine is, first thing is the lemon water. Now I put other stuff in there. I put apple cider vinegar. I have acid or a humic fulvic acid mix, because that's a detox of heavy metals. And I put a little stevia in there because the apple cider vinegar is kind of tart. And I also put something called cell food, which is an oxygenator, which helps make my red blood cells not stick together. Okay. So I put all this, and this is what I drink in the morning. Then the next thing is that I do drink decaf coffee, but a particular kind. And that is, it's called Swiss water processed. And that takes out 99.9% of the caffeine. And it's also organic. So I get away from the pesticides. I get away from the fungicides, herbicides, and probably away from the mold. Because generally speaking, coffee in general has a lot of toxins in there. They're small, but regular use, builds that up in your body. And that is and then look at the sun. Look at the sun. That's possibly the most important one, because that gets your cortisol naturally boosted.
There we go. I had some of that, but I didn't have all of that. And I'm loved that you gave us your whole morning concoction.
Yeah. Right.
All right. What's your favorite book or quote that keeps you grounded?
I was going to save this to the end, but I'll tell you now. And it's another Brendaism.
I figured it was going to be one of those, but I wasn't going to say anything. I was ready to go ahead.
She's a wise woman. Okay. And she uses this regularly, as I do now. And that is, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. However, you can make it thirsty. And that is my mission, is to make people thirsty for information about their health, because caffeine has an impact on your health. So this isn't just about caffeine. I'm not anti-caffeine. I'm pro-health and pro-knowledge. And, I've been a caffeine user. I don't use it much anymore. If I'm, this is my first drive to Florida this year. Just last week was the first time in my life that I've driven to Florida and not used caffeine. because
Oh,
when I
Steve.
drive, I don't want to fall asleep. I want to be awake.
Mhm.
And after 12 and a half hours last Saturday or last Friday, I looked at Brenda and I said, we're in the elevator in our hotel, 11:30 at night. And I looked at her and I said, you know what? I'm not tired. I am naturally energized. Now I went to sleep. Now, when I drink caffeine during the day, I will lay in bed sometime for 2 or 3 hours because
Mm.
I don't process fast. I'm one of those guys. So it stays with me. I wake up the next morning, I'm fried. So guess what I do? I drink some more caffeine. I have a big cup of coffee. I'll have a couple sodas in the car. I haven't had an energy drink in years, but if I had one now, I would probably bounce off the ceiling, right? Because there's definitely positive things that happen in that
Mhm.
case when you drink caffeine. Okay, it gives you energy, it gives you that alertness, but when you come down, it's ugly, and that's the downside for college students and high school students and that's why there's no long-term benefit to drinking caffeine when you're studying or cramming, because you're going to have a few moments, 15 minutes, maybe 45 minutes of peak awareness. But then when you're coming down, you're miserable. You're lousy. You're only thinking about your next caffeine hit. You're not thinking about studying. You're not thinking about writing something. And so what you're doing is you're borrowing energy from later on for now. Because ultimately the adenosine is going to get into your brain and you're going to go get brain fog, you're going to get tired, and you're going to have to go to sleep.
Gotcha. Thank you, Steve. All right. What is your go-to nourishing snack or drink for energy now?
That's a great question because I drink mostly Zevia, which is it's zero calorie, non-GMO soda. Okay. And there are things that can help. Rooibos tea is one. That's herbal teas and herbal coffees, especially organic ones, are really good, and they give you ashwagandha, which is an adaptogen. It's a supplement, and I take it every day. What it does, especially if you're quitting caffeine, it can really help you uh, settle down some of those lows. It helps you get off that low because it's a natural stimulant. Okay, and there's several others there, but the herbals, well, melatonin is one. You can have a tea in the afternoon or early evening, which will then help you relax. Lavender, those are things
Wait,
I
to
put.
give you energy.
Yes, doesn't give
Okay.
you energy. It just keeps you stable.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're
Right.
giving us insights for stability and
Yes.
calmness. Okay.
Right.
Instead
Yep.
of getting overly low.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Herbal teas, ashwagandha. All right. A belief you had to unlearn to become who you are today.
Oh. Sometimes I say things because I don't have a filter. Okay. And I'm taking the filter off here. I don't believe anything on the news, so I don't watch it. I don't watch mainstream TV because TV and commercials are pure brainwashing. And that is something until Brenda got sick. And we had another episode in there with my grandson, and I'm not going to get into it. But what it did is it put us down into the natural health rabbit hole, and you realize that the vast majority of what you hear on TV is not the truth. It's purely profit driven. If you look at breakfast cereals, they're loaded with gluten, with glyphosate, and with sugar. This is not how you want to start your day, because if you get a sugar buzz first thing in the morning, you're going to crash. You're going to need more sugar. It's just like caffeine, right? I mean, it's the same concept. And so I would say that belief that you have to listen to what they say on the TV, that's wrong. Okay. And that's a bold statement, but I can back that up, So where do I get my news? Off of Telegram and off the internet, off of sources that I trust and that I can go and fact check, the old
Gotcha.
fact checking thing. Okay. Well, I go in and do this. I don't rely on somebody else because I have to be an advocate for myself. No one else is going to advocate for my health. We learned that with
Right.
Brenda.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you said that too, because as we wrap up this conversation, I love that you brought back to advocacy, because we talked about the resiliency and really investigating and navigating through the healthcare system and seeing all the ologists, 17 doctors, I believe, different
Yes,
doctors to
that
get
was
it.
right. Yeah.
And for you to actually go to advocate for your health, advocate for your health, advocate for your life. And sometimes
Yes.
when you realize that you are the person that needs to love you more, the person that you need to take care of the most, and the person that you have to advocate for, you really start identifying what, like, that takes up most of your energy. Most of your mission and your values are in how you care for you. But if you're always so focused on everybody else, you start to neglect yourself. You start to show
Yes.
up for them, and you forget to
Right.
figure out how to actually heal and
Yeah.
be with you and love you every day. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. And then the last vitality spark, and we'll get into the final two questions. What does real energy mean to you now?
I feel great with no stimulants,
Yeah.
with no drugs. I'm 68 years old. I'm on no meds. I wake up in the morning and I am so productive. It's amazing.
That's
And
real energy.
yes, and
That's
that's
real
real.
energy
Yep.
right there. Okay, I love it.
And
All right, last two questions, Steve.
okay.
Give some insights to the girl dads, the father figures, the role models, the partners, spouses, for those with pelvic pain, heavy periods, fertility issues, those that deal with potential undiagnosed or diagnosed endometriosis, adenomyosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, or fibroids. How could those male figures be more a part of the conversation, the support system, and the healing journey of those women?
That's a amazing question, because you realize guys don't talk about this.
I don't. That's why it's a question
I'm
every
talking about
episode.
it, and when I talk about this with other guys in particular, they look at me like, "Why are you telling me this?" I say, because realize that every man has at least one woman in his life, his mom. Now wherever he goes after that, but he's stuck with her because she's there. You got sisters, you got whatever, and it's so important to understand what's going on in a woman's body through that cycle, okay? And if caffeine is affecting, that last stage where there's and it does aggravate PMS, it aggravates some of this stuff, and obviously in some women, not all women, but in some. And I would say that people tend to be embarrassed talking about sperm and vaginas and eggs and menstrual cycles, okay? This is life. Okay. And if we can address it and have a great conversation about it, everybody wins. Nobody loses here, because an informed mind is a great mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody in my family happens to be really crabby one week of the month, maybe I need to understand and have a little more empathy that it's beyond her control, right? Because it's often is not. It's her body. It's how her body reacts to her cycle. And so I would say to educate yourself, and you can do it quite intimately on your own laptop and nobody has to know, but you'll know. And then you can maybe deal with them with a little more compassion and empathy and love.
I love that, Steve. Thank you for that. Empathy, compassion, love, but most importantly, an informed mind is a great mind. Educate yourself and get it. All right. Last question, Steve. If you could have a meal with any historical figure, who would it be and what would y'all eat?
I think undoubtedly it would be Jesus Christ.
Okay. And what would you be eating with Jesus?
Well, I watched some of the Chosen, and I'll tell you what, I don't really want to eat some of that, but so I could go with some bread, unleavened bread. If they could throw some meat in there, that would be outstanding, because I love meat. Okay, and they ate a lot of lamb in the day and that kind of thing, and they made good meals. I mean, and there's in the Middle Eastern culture, there's a lot of fantastic spices, and I would love to throw some of those in there, because I like spicy food. When we were in the restaurant business, we were in the Mexican restaurant business. And so for 23 years, I ate jalapenos and hot sauce every day, and so I've kind of, my palate needs a little bit of stimulation. So I would say that I would have an interesting discussion with him about his life and his role and about what we were eating. And the fact that, it's amazing what they used to do. I mean, compared to what we have now is just.
Right. So some unleavened bread, some meat, and making sure we have some good aromatic spices.
Yes.
To stimulate that palate and some good.
There you go.
Yep. I love it. All right, Steve. Well, it has been absolutely amazing having this conversation with you. Go ahead and let the people know where they can find you, where they could connect with you.
It's on our website. It's releasethecoffeecuffs.com. And you can buy the book there if you choose, but it's got a lot of information. I'm going to give you some links that you can put in the show notes. And one of them is a tools and trackers. And it's got 7 different tools for people if they want to track, example, caffeine intake, but also it could be alcohol, it could be cigarettes. If you understand what you're doing to yourself, you can then make an effort to change it. But if you don't know how much alcohol you're drinking in a day, how much cigarettes, how many milligrams of caffeine, if you don't know, you can't fix it. And then we have all kinds of other tools.
You can't fix it. Y'all drop that in the comments if you're with us rolling towards the end. If you don't know, you can't fix it. Yes.
So there's a lot of information on the website about this and about what I do. I have a coaching program there. My long-term goal, short, medium, and long-term is to get out and spread this message at wellness conferences, possibly March of Dimes with birth defects, possibly pro-life, live action, people that are dealing with women who are in that phase of their life. Okay. And let's face it, it is a health epidemic. Nobody wants to talk about it. And I believe that I can shed some light on there in a very compassionate tone. Because again, I was a chronic user. I understand. You want to call it addiction, it is, but that's not the point. You're addicted. If you quit coffee for a day and you start getting the headaches, you're addicted. Okay. Yeah. That is the tried and true way to figure out if you have an addiction to caffeine, because in 12 to 24 hours, you're going to start feeling bad. And so you can reach me on the website. There's a contact thing there. You can email me. I'll respond to your questions. And I would just encourage you to pursue knowledge about your body and what you're putting in your body. And because there's so many other things, that we haven't touched on. We touched on the food, the 5 ingredient thing and the not pronounced, those are handy little tips.
And we can always have another conversation too, Steve, if you're open into it, taking it to a whole nother level. But absolutely. I really love that you told them to make sure that they are aware and to get educated and knowledgeable so you can start making those intentional decisions to shifting and adopting your lifestyle one habit at a time based on the rhythm that you want to have for your life. Y'all, it's been another amazing episode of the Empire Plates, Empire Lives podcast. It's your healthy habits and lifestyle coach, Jovonnie, with Mr. Steve, author of Release the Coffee Cups. Y'all, check the show notes. Make sure you get the good vibes and good value. And if you're not subscribed, make sure you hit subscribe. And if you're not following the podcast on your favorite podcast distribution platform that you might be listening to us right now, make sure you hit follow and give the podcast a rating. Thanks for vibing with me, y'all.